I think they're great songs. Thank God we never realized how great they were when we did them, because that would have made us probably very nervous.
I mean, every day was a new adventure in a way. We could live this dream, and much faster than we were expecting.
Yeah, it was a dream come true for us that we were actually able to write our own music and that people would listen to that.
Still gets me goosebumps because it must be amazing for artists to have this breakthrough.
For me, it was a watershed moment because it was like the fruition of everything I'd worked for. It was always been a dream to produce a #1, and I had never dreamed that it would be that big.
I'm happy that it's that way, that it's still relevant and it still be played. I definitely am proud to be part of it, or being part of this production. Yeah.
All the things fell together like perfectly, and there was a lot of trust.
Yeah, trust. Trust was very important. Sometimes Bernard made suggestions to how I should sing. Frank came in with some ideas, and sometimes I came up with some ideas for him or for Frank. When you are a musician, you know, what is the main goal? The main goal is not to become an adult. I mean, just playing all the time. Nobody of us ever grew up.
Forever young, I want to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever? Forever young.
I guess that we had lots of influences, but they all came from the same kind of field. I was for sure very impressed by Kraftwerk, also by David Bowie, but in the Alphaville music you probably can hear more Kraftwerk elements than David Bowie elements. All the first Mute records, the very early Depeche Mode stuff and OMD stuff, Ultravox, all this kind of music from that new wave, new romantic area in the late 70s, early 80s, that was for sure, and gave us ideas.
It gave you ideas.
Okay.
I'm part of a different generation, and so my musical background is very different, but it's like, you know, it fits. My musical background was more people that really nobody knows, artists that nobody knows, that only I knew, like Brian Prozero or a German band from Munich that I really still adore very much, called Lunaset. And it has all these artists never had any significance, you know, for like further development or influencing other artists. It was just my private universe. Nevertheless, these artists were they were really a huge influence.
I never had this idea of now I want to become a musician or now I want to become a producer. It was like making music in whatever ways. And since I couldn't really play an instrument, I mean, I never perceived myself really as a musician.
When I was 12, 13, I was singing in the school choir, and I was listening to lots of records, and I was just dreaming. No, I wasn't even dreaming becoming a musician or what. You know, it was a pure coincidence. You know, there was this punk rock revolution at the time, and lots of people who had absolutely no idea about music, you know, started playing their own music. And the thing was always for us that we would never ever like playing music of other people. The main adventure for us was to create our own music, to compose our own music.
First time that I got the idea was when a friend of mine, my hero, the great DJ in the club where I always went to, when he decided to go to Berlin and told me, well, I'm creating music now, I bought a synthesizer and I'm off. And I thought, well, if he's doing that, you should think about that yourself.
But suddenly, because of the technology, because there were like sequences and rhythm machines and things, you know, that would help us to to create and to, that the ideas, our crazy ideas about music would come alive. That was just, I think without this technology, Alphaville would have never existed. And then I met this guy, and at least he could play a little bit of keyboards.
Just a very little.
But for me, it was more like typewriting.
When I was doing all this stuff in my bedroom, and when I came down once, my father, who was working in the garden, he looked at me and said, "Well, Bernd, it doesn't make sense. Give it up." And well, that was in a way like, okay, I have to go on. I met Marion, and then this whole story began. And I heard the first tape from them, and that was the moment where I realized that Marion actually can sing, which was quite rare in this, at least in the German new wave scene.
We had all jobs. He was doing Ersatzdienst.
Zivildienst.
Zivildienst. And I was working in a pub, in a kitchen. Bernhard was living in Enger at that time. I was in Münster. It was basically that I was like hitchhiking over to Münster, to Enger, and then we did lots of work there. Sometimes, because we had this studio in Münster, Bernhard would come along, and then we would work there. And later on, when we, I think from 1984 on, we basically worked there in the Münster studio.
It was a process without dividing things. It all came up by chance. All of a sudden, over a weekend, we had a new song was done. And when we started to work in Münster, we only worked over the weekends. And the next weekend, we listened to that from the last weekend and thought, well, how did that happen?
Once we found an idea that we would like to follow, we went through this not like this, but like this, till we finally got there. But when it came to finding or creating the rhythm parts of the songs, it was basically his part. And then it was just like, I just left it. I knew that I would like it.
I mean, the advantage of not being musicians, there's one advantage. You don't have this ego feeling like, this is my guitar, I'm playing the guitar and it has to be like this. None of us were acting like that.
Because we're not good enough.
Marion and Frank went to Berlin to get something like a record contract. I mean, at that time we didn't even know that there were no record companies in Berlin.
No, we were only publishing companies. I thought, well, in Berlin, everything is in Berlin. So yeah, let's go to Berlin and present our tape there to record companies. But then I met a musician there, and he said, sorry, the record companies are in Hamburg, in Frankfurt, and Munich, not in Berlin. And we hitchhiked the whole way, from Münster out there. I said to Frank, what we're going to do now? And this guy said, okay, I'll give you some addresses from some studios and producers and publishers and stuff. We went to all these people in one day. I mean, I called them on the phone. I said, hey, we're Alphaville. We have some music. We would like to have a record deal or something. Could you help us? And they said, okay, come along. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, can you imagine today? I don't know. I mean, because they were all sitting in West Berlin, probably nobody ever called them. I have no idea. Well, anyway, we went there and then we played them the tape. Sometimes they said, okay, leave the tape here and I listen to it and let you know. And we said, no, we only have this tape. We need to, because we go also to some other people, we have some other appointments. Okay, all right.
My first meeting with the band was when Marion came into the office. I was working at that time as head of production for the publisher. Marion came into the office with demos, and I'd always been looking for a new romantic band. That's what I was basically there for, because the company had been, up to that point, it had been very Schlager-orientated. And I was looking for, you know, I was into Howard Jones, Paul Young, Human League, these kind of bands, and I wanted to try and find something for the German market. I played the tape, and as soon as I heard his voice, I thought, this is really, really good. And the songs were, the songs were a little confused, but they were, the elements of the songs were really excellent. And I said to him I'd like to keep the tape, and I came back with an offer.
I called back to Münster and said, hey, listen, we have like 3 record deals. We can decide between 3 record deals. We had 3 record deals in one day, without doing any concert, without, you know, just out of blue.
I met the guys when the contract was signed, I guess, and when we started to talk about the production.
There was like somebody up there like that.
And Big in Japan was not on this.
And Big in Japan was not on the tape.
That makes the song in a way.
The basic idea of Big in Japan is the bass line, which just goes like da-dum, da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-dum. And then we had a completely different intro, and then Frank came up with this idea with this ding, 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 which is the signature intro sound, you know, which is just a very, became very, very famous. So, you know, it's probably the whole song, you know, in a few bars. Also, it was never, you know, it was a later invention for the song, but it reflects very much the musical idea of it.
That's the first tape with this well-known intro sound, which are actually 2 sounds, 1 panned hard left, 1 panned hard right.
It's about the drug scene in Berlin. And at that time, I mean, I had quite a few connections, you know, to people who had. I was, in a way, I was part of that scene myself. I had a girlfriend. She was addicted to heroin, and yeah, it was just a song about the scene at that time.
The producers wanted to add some guitar to this 5th synth sound because they thought it's not heavy enough.
When we started with the production, we told Wolfgang Loos, our producer, well, we try out everything, you know. I mean, we're really interested in trying out things on the songs. There's just one thing we don't like. We don't want to have any guitars on that song. He said, oh yeah, no problem. Okay. So we worked on that song and recorded a couple of tracks, and then Wolfgang said, well, you make a break now, you know, and have like some lunch or so, and we do something with the song.
They sent us out of the studio to have lunch or something, and when we walked down the stairs, we already could hear the Gibson guitar playing this. We hated it.
I had problems to get the right power with synthesizers, to get the power and pressure into the tune. So I did what every rock musician would do in this moment. He took the guitar and played 2 or 3 or 4 tracks with power chords underneath. And if you listen to the end of the song, you hear them very clearly. And in the beginning, you hardly can hear them because we don't want to have guitars so obviously in the song.
we had to admit that it adds something to the whole thing.
Neon on my naked skin, passing silhouettes of strange illuminated mannequins. Shall I stay here at the zoo, or should I go and change my point of view?
And that's Marian's solo vocal.
You did what you did to me, now it's history.
When I wrote the lyrics, there was a huge interest of heavy metal music in Japan. And lots of European bands, American bands, that nobody knew in their homeland, they would come to Japan and play there in front of 10,000 people. And then they would come back and say, oh God, you know, it was fantastic, you know, to people that nobody were interested in them in their homelands. And they would say, but we are big in Japan. And it was a kind of ridiculous, a kind of ridiculous situation.
I think I actually didn't meet the band at the first moment. I think I met Marian, because I was used to do covers for a lot of German bands those years. And Marian one day came to my office and said, I'm the guy from Alphaville, which I already knew because I have seen a couple of pictures and stuff. And he said, we're going to work together. First cover I think I did was a Big in Japan single cover. I remember it, I didn't remember it very well, but I think we started with that. We started with a photo session, which was horrible expensive from the habits of the record company. And I remember it very well because I was working with Peter Köpke mostly, you know, he was head of the A&R at Warner those days. And he was kind of a friend, and the boss of the record company was Ziggy Loch. And Ziggy Loch really flipped out because we had this horrible, expensive photo session I was fighting for days. We put it on the sleeve in the right corner on the button, and he was really yelling at me and saying, you know what this, you know, the costs, and you put it this small. But this was the 80s, you know, doing the big things small and the small things blowing them up.
One of the stipulations that Warner Brothers made was that he wanted changes. But I was completely okay with that, as long as the band were okay with it. It was basic stuff. He wanted the choruses warmer. He wanted there's certain synthesizer work leading into the choruses from the end of the verses. There's a kind of synthesizer riff that goes in there, and we didn't have that at the time, but that's what he wanted, so that it escalated into the refrain. What we did then was we went back into the studio and we recorded 16-voice choir on the refrain. In fact, we tracked it, so there must be at least 32 voices on the back. It was a huge choir.
We recorded 8 tracks of them with ours, and also doing a doubling of Marian's vocals, and we added lots of things, playing the vocal line, and all this came together, and in the end sounded something like this. This is not finished mix. So in the end you could hear this choir getting much too loud. I mean, we just added a little texture, a little bit of this whole thing to make the choir a little bit bigger. And this choir actually sounded very strange. And that sounded...
And we didn't actually use the choir itself. We we put the choir into the reverb and just used the reverb so that it had this big curtain of you can't actually hear it. If you listen to the record, all you know is that it sounds like a synthesizer, but it isn't. It's a choir of, I think it's 32 voices.
And I thought this would really fit to this situation in the story of the song, where this two guys, you know, they want to get out of the drug scene. They want to stop. They want to get clean, and they're dreaming about, you know, they're dreaming a dream that will never come true, because they will never ever get off the drug. It's just an empty fantasy. And that's why I thought it would fit very nicely, this Big in Japan thing. And people constantly coming up to us and saying, have you ever been big in Japan? No, we never had. We never had been big in Japan. The gong at the end, which I think is ridiculous, but I mean, we did it. And probably avoided to be successful in Japan. That's right.
I had a friend at the Ethnological Museum in Berlin, and I asked him for a huge gong, and he said, yeah, we have a tom-tom, a huge gong. And so he made it possible that we could get this gong for one day. So we carried it with a van into the studio, and in the studio we hardly got it in there, but it didn't sound at all.
It was a huge thing. It was about this size. We put it in the courtyard and mic'd it up. And someone hit it as hard as possible, because if we'd done it in the studio, I think it would have deafened everyone working there.
And I hit this gong, and it was terrible loud in the backyard. It was echoing all over the place. And I asked him, it's okay. No, we need a second hit. It was too loud. Okay. He changed the gain, second hit, and make this heavy noise again. And then I'd ask for a third hit, but Bobo said, no, the police is here. And it was so fast that the police was in the studio and stopped this recording because we were too loud with this gong. And this is the gong in the end of the second hit of the Big in Japan.
At the beginning, they were just a band, you know, and by the time that the Big in Japan was #1, I don't think they were they didn't have their feet on the ground, which is a tough place to be, I think, because they had to redefine themselves somewhat. That's the impression I got.
But we were just overruled by the events, because we were still in the middle of production of the album when the first single came out, and then I mean, it was like an avalanche. And while we were producing, suddenly we were producing $1 million album in a way, you know, like, which would probably will sell like lots of hundreds, thousands of, in fact it did then.
Yeah, everything changed. But not just with the band, everything around changed. All of a sudden there was people looking at you and discussing, and people were very interested in this scene because there was a lot of money all of a sudden. So it changed everything, and the band it's changed too, definitely.
So when we started, we were just doing a production of a band which is very new and very unexperienced, and in the middle of the production we were already superstars, you know, and we were still in the middle of the production of the album. It was a very, very absurd and bizarre situation.
I remember when we came into the studio where we were supposed to do the production, he looked at us a little bit like, what do they want? They have no idea, and we had no idea about all the studio techniques. We had no real idea about music, but we had an idea how it should sound.
They seemed to know what they wanted to go for. They were very experienced with the analog equipment and step sequences, and they made wonderful demos where you could exactly hear what's in their mind.
We actually, I mean, he realized that we had an idea, and we realized how good he actually was doing realizing what we had in mind.
But it was basically you who had the idea about, you know, how the music should sound. I didn't. Actually, for me it was just like, oh God, we're in the studio. Wow, wow. I leave it all to him. You know, it's just like, wow, we're in the studio, yes. You know, with the producer, you know, okay.
From my impression, all the songs changed arrangement-wise or sound-wise a lot, but if you listen to the demos, you can feel that there is, I mean, they have the same atmosphere.
In the studio, you've got to remember that this time that we recorded this was right on the cusp of MIDI. I mean, 2 years before that, there was no MIDI. So this was like, some of this was cutting edge.
Yeah, this is the SRC Friendship. The company is called Friendship, a Berlin company. They invented it, or it's actually one guy who did that. It's generating a time code that you can record on tape, and it's reading the time code and is generating clocks and triggers for sequences, drum machines, and the arpeggio from the Jupiter 8 in time to a certain tempo.
We had basically in this album the first Lindrum machine, which had the serial number 17 all over the world. It was pretty early.
We used, during the whole production, we used the Lin LM1 and a drum machine that has, I guess, 16 different sounds, 12 outputs or something. You could adjust all the levels, and that was a great thing. You could program everything, all the grooves, and do some additions. The thing was that the sounds were always the same, and you couldn't really do anything about it. But then Lin came up with the idea to change the sounds, but that was quite a hassle, because the sound of a bass drum, for instance, was on a chip like this, and when you wanted to change the bass drum sound, you had to get a screwdriver and get this chip out of the box, open it up, get this chip out, and put a new one in. So this was actually our library of drum sounds. And I mean, just one drum sound on one chip at that time.
It was really important that you had someone there in the studio who could handle the whole technical side of instrumentation and recording, and we had that in Wolfgang Loos, who's an incredible professional and someone who was very, very important in that production.
Well, I did a couple of productions together with Carla, and he was very focused on the vocals and on the pronunciation, which was a big effort. And I was responsible for the music and doing the music, changing the music, preparing the music, playing the music, arranging the music, whatever was needed.
What I have in my mind about the production is basically Bernard, Colin and Wolfgang, because they did the production. I was just sitting there and was happy. You see them working and see the album growing. I couldn't believe it. It was just like a dream. And they did a whole lot of the production. Sometimes I said something to this and that, I like this, or like, oh, could we try it like this or that? But it was basically what they did there was what I really liked, and yeah, and I was very happy.
We had points where we all sit together and discussed the sounds and tried to improve them. And we had, the band sometimes had a TV gig or something like that. So I had some days to use on my own and work on the sounds, which I liked.
For me, it was a question of sorting out where the commercial elements were. Which elements were going to sell this song and which weren't. And obviously there were so many ideas in there that you couldn't put them all in. You had to choose which ones you were going to take, and that was the difficult part, knowing what to leave out.
Colin gave us the impression that he understood what we were doing. I mean, native English speaker, he understood the lyrics, which was quite important.
And we had like lots of songs also in German when before we started doing the album. And then we made the final decision. You know, we had like really nice songs like Blauer Engel and Traumtänzer and Leben ohne Ende and some other really nice songs on one hand. But then we had the English songs, Big in the Pan, Sounds Like a Melody, Forever Young. I mean, it was clear that we would go with the English songs then, you know, and then we thought, okay, then all the other songs will be English as well.
Yeah, there are always two levels of understanding in the lyrics. That's how I perceive it. And there you can understand it in an easy way, but there is something beneath which is actually very dark. And that's what I always found absolutely interesting. And I think the lyrics are really great.
There's a strong romantic side in it, and also inside the music. And romanticism has always a dark side, otherwise it's not romanticism. I mean, it's just, there's light and shadow, and probably in romanticism the shadow is a more interesting thing. Many people who are bilingual, they say it's a big difference between French and German, or English and German, or English and French. Actually, yeah, it is. But in my mind, it's not. It's just like, it doesn't matter where to put the verb or the subject of a sentence, you know, that doesn't make any difference for me.
I have to realize it was the analog days. You know, we didn't work at all digital. The whole cover was done in an analog way, which means I was sitting there with scissors and cutters and stuff and had these papers, you see these colors, you know, they existed in real. So, you know, they were just glued one to each another, and everything was done by hand and then photographed, and in a post-production, you know, fitted more or less correctly. It was a completely different work than today, because it was not easy to switch an artwork, to say, oh, let's choose that color or switch it to sides. It was not that easy like we have it today. It's like, you know, you take everything, what you can get, you hear the music, you talk to the artist, you read the lyrics, and then you put everything together in your head and just walk away. You know, and when you are lucky, this matches one day with something which fits or which comes together. But at first it has to come together in your head, you know, that you have the chance to bring it on paper or together in a visual. You know, and there's no real explanation for that. You know, I knew the statue, for example, which exists in Hamburg in a small street. It is really not very special, but I had seen this face, and I have had these new informations about Alphaville. And I knew that I had to go there to make a photo, and probably this would fit together.
Sounds Like a Melody was not part of the original set of songs. Warner Brothers had said to me, what we want to do is we want to have Forever Young as a third single. So we want to have Big in Japan, another song, then Forever Young, and if we can do that, we've got a gold album.
After the first thing that became so successful, Big in Japan, the record company came up and said, "Oh, you guys, you seem really to know how to write hits, you know, so can you write another hit?"
We asked the band to go back home to Münster and write new material for a second single, and that's what they did.
And we said, yeah, sure, we do it. You know, so we said one night, we sat in our studio and wrote Sounds Like a Melody. The
record company and I went down there and listened to the first song that they played us. I think it was Sounds Like a Melody. It was an extraordinary song. because it was almost instant. I mean, they didn't have any time to do this, really.
And I hated it. I hated it. I mean, it was really prostitutional in a way. It was like, it felt like, okay, yeah, somebody comes up and write a hit, you know, and then it didn't feel right. It was like selling out. And so I hated this song for maybe 15 years. I hated this song very much.
I remember it in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm.
We were already working on Sounds Like a Melody when we got the phone call, can you do another one? And Colin was on the phone and saying, well, would be great if you do a new song in major. And we said, well, yeah, we're working on a song right now, but that's in minor. And he said, it doesn't matter. It was not really on that they called us and we started. We were already doing that at that time. So maybe that's a relief for you. We were lucky again, just putting a few drum sounds together, a drum groove and a really good sounding bass that I'm absolutely happy with. I can play that. Very simple, great sound. Bass, drum, snare. Where's the snare? Comes late. And that basically goes through the whole song. It's just 4 chords.
In the beginning, there are these funny electronic tom-toms. There was a new sound, a sample sound actually, of the PPG. And the first time that I ever played drums over the keys of a keyboard and not with the pads of a drum machine.
I think that this intro riff that Frank came up with is in a way simple, but it has such an impact and atmosphere and leads into the song.
What happened was I sketched out with Wolfgang Loos some ideas on the violin, which I thought might work for that end section. I'm not sure he took everything I played him, but I think one of the things that I played him as an idea, he latched onto. And my mind is sketchy about this. I don't know how much the band were involved in writing those little bits of pieces. I think was on that track we had the strings from the Deutsche Oper string section, which Wolfgang scored.
So we need a long version for it, and can you write a string arrangement for this recording? Yes, I said, of course. Okay, and then write one down, and he was a big fan of Elton John. He said, some kind of this sound like Elton John had sometimes in his songs. Okay, and then I wrote a string arrangement.
The arrangement was great, and the string players are probably great when they are where they usually play, but in a pop music recording studio with a click in their headphones.
And they came into the studio, and some parts were pretty fast, 16th, and a lot of offbeats. And they were all classical musicians, and they had big problems to play offbeat wise. So they always played on the downbeats. And I was conducting them, and I was working harder and harder and harder. On the third day, I had such muscle pain because of this heavy conducting. But there was the recording of these wonderful strings.
I was saying this is about MIDI. This is MIDI, and you're talking about 40 milliseconds, timing-wise. You can't get a string player to do that. I mean, I can't do it, and they couldn't do it either. So they were a little bit behind the beat, almost sometimes to a 16th.
We can listen to these strings, and you can easily hear that they are not 100% in time. Or at least a few of them are not in time, which doesn't make it better.
We couldn't get them to lie right on the beat, so we recorded it. And when they'd gone home, we moved it digitally, about a 16th up, so that it sat right on the beat. We had to do that.
We could work it out that it fits into the whole atmosphere of the song.
If you think about it, the lyrics are extraordinary. The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody. To once forbidden places we go for a while. You've got to remember that's a German guy writing English. In English that would be exceptional for an English writer, but a German guy doing it in English, that shows how talented he is.
It's a really great song. It's also one of those songs that doesn't have very much content, lyric-wise or something. It was just a vague idea about Hitchcock movies and Cary Grant and Grace Kelly. And it's like there's this pair of lovers in the cinema, and they're watching this movie, Über den Dächern von Nizza. And they're projecting themselves and suddenly they're in the movie. And it was a very vague idea, and the lyrics, they don't explain it very much, but that was the background about it, and it doesn't make very much sense. But it's a nice song.
The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody. To unforbidden places we'll go for a while. The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody.
So this is all Marian. One lead vocal, which is already quite high. But then we really wanted to let it shine. And Colin said, well, Marian, you have to sing this very high. But that was actually too much. And there is this very high voice, but as you can hear, the tape has been slowed down to make him able to really sing.
The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like. The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody. To unforbidden places we'll go for a while. The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody. To unforbidden places we'll go for.
I heard of this effect because of recordings of Earth, Wind and Fire. They had these famous Phoenix horns who played the brass section for the Earth, Wind and Fire band. And they used this method to lower the speed and the tonality of the tape recorder and play in a lower key on the tape. And when you speed it up, you have it more accurate, and you can reach regions which are not possible.
The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody. To unforbidden places we'll go for a while. The ringing of your laughter, it sounds like a melody. To unforbidden places we'll go for. The ringing of your...
That is the lead vocal, which is actually absolutely excellent, I think. But in the whole playback, it didn't sound that it was enough.
Marian was very open-minded to all experiments, especially with his vocals, and whatever you suggest to him, he would agree and try it out, and had a lot of power and energy to go all these ways and try to improve it.
when we started to work together, Marian, Frank and me, the first song we ever wrote was Forever Young. And, but it was meant to be a dance track with a 16th picky groove, a little bit influenced by Soft Cell Torch. I remember that was the one that I was playing when I was a DJ at that time, and I thought, well, that sounds great, and let's try to do something like that.
I remember that when Bernard and Frank, when they gave me the music, they said, listen to that tape, you know, and try sing something along with the music. And I wrote the lyrics and I introduced it to Bernard, and I came to the chorus, and I stopped and said, oh, okay, Bernard, I think about something better than this. This is probably a little bit too flat. And he said, no, come on, carry on, it's okay.
I mean, that was quite an incredible moment when Marian, just after writing down some words on a piece of paper, and he asked for the microphone, and he started to sing the song as everybody knows it now. And a moment that I for sure never will forget, when he started to sing the chorus, and he said, well, I do something better. No, you don't. You won't do anything better than that. When we wrote the song and did the first demo, that was from the production far away from what ended up on the album, and it became the single.
Forever Young was from the very beginning my favorite song, and I had the feeling that this could be a big success. I had this feeling several times, and sometimes it never happened. But in this case, luckily it happened, yeah.
During the production, we had problems to get this 16th groove working.
In fact, it was an up-tempo song. We tried 2 days of doing the up-tempo version, and it just wasn't working. And I remember after the first day I went up to my flat and I scored out the entire rhythm section again, trying to simplify it, or trying to make it easier. And we came down and we programmed that in, and it didn't work either. And we were kind of sitting around wondering what to do when Andreas Buddha came in.
We worked there for 3 days on the same song, which was by far too much for circumstance at that time. You know, we recorded the song in 1 day or maybe 2 days, you know, as a complete unknown band.
Andreas, Andy had some of these good ideas from time to time. It was good that he was not too often in the studio, because there was a little bit hard work with him. But he had good ideas, yeah.
And so on the third day, Andy Buddha came into the studio. He used to come into the studio quite often to see what we were going to do there, and it just took too long, you know, to record this song, and we really didn't know what to do with the song. I mean, we were just stuck into it.
It also didn't really work out.
This was an up-tempo version. On the third day, he just came in and said, "Okay, no, you must do something really a big change, you know, to make this song happen, you know." So let me sit behind the mixer. So where are all the drums? Where are all the sequences? Everything, you know. Okay, Wolfgang showed him everything there, and then he said, "Okay, where's the vocals and the strings?"
And he put all the
faders down. And he just put everything down apart from the strings and the vocal, and said, "Now play it."
Then he said, after listening to it, "This is the song. All the rest can go." The main pad is like this. Very simple chord changes.
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while.
And that's the song.
Heaven can wait, we're only watching.
Marian, of course, immediately thought this was great, because he's like that.
That was the song. That was basically the song. There was, I mean, He rescued us.
I think Bernd was less. He was worried about that. I don't know. You'll have to ask him about that.
I wasn't too convinced about that, because for me it was always a dance track. But after listening to it for several times, well, we all agreed, well, yeah, that has atmosphere, that has feeling, that is how it should be.
We did try it as a ballad. We slowed it right down. And it was phenomenal.
Apart from that, it's not that much going on. All the stuff that is recorded through the whole song comes in later, during the mix.
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while. Heaven can wait, we're only watching the skies. Hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Are you gonna drop the bomb or not? Let us die young or let us live forever. We don't have the power, but we never say never. Sitting in a sandpit, life is a short trip. The music's for the sand.
The lyric was about all these fantastic things, these big things that are bigger than life, you know, and about immortality and all these things that are fiction in a way, fictitious, and they are. But on the other hand, you know, we all believe in those kind of fictitious things. And when I wrote the lyrics, then suddenly I came to big rock and roll shows, and I imagined that all these people were like shouting at us, yeah! It had a very fascistic feeling to me. And then I wrote this line, Little fascist lady, she loves you so. And when we wanted to release the song in the States, you know, they came up and said, we really like the song, but this line has to go. He said, come on, you can do it, you know, and then we changed it to turn our golden faces into the sun, which is just the most stupid line in the song. But anyway.
That's true.
We're playing the song on each and every occasion, on funerals, on marriages, weddings, on birthdays. It's like a matrix. When people, they put their own things into this matrix, and then they get pictures out of it from their own ideas, and it's just a matrix that creates the pictures, and that's how I mean, it's very hard to understand. A song like this is very strange. It has a life on its own.
The thing you have to remember about Marion's voice is that it's very fragile, in the sense that every small nuance of intonation is very, very clear. So my main job was to make sure that the intonation was perfect. And that's very, very hard for him, because he had this monster song that he had to sing, and he had this producer in the studio telling him that it's flat and it's sharp and his timing's wrong, or the way he's pronouncing it is wrong. So it was tough.
Colin was pushing him because of the pronunciation, because we wanted to have it right.
And so you have always had to decide, oh, can you get it better? Yes, of course I can. So then sing it better. And then it started all over again. Intonation, pronunciation, timing, and expression. And it lasts some hours to get the right combination of these qualities.
I don't know how many times Marion was singing the first line of this song, because the first line is where you send the signal what it is about.
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while.
The question was, dance or dance? Because dance is American and dance is British, and we wanted to sound British. And Marion sometimes forgot about that, and the line was perfectly in tune, but he was singing dance. He has this outstanding voice with these overtones that you can easily hear. Even if he's singing in a big choir, you will hear him. I've heard that. A very, very special tone.
So many dreams swinging out of the blue, we'll let them come true. Forever young, I want to be forever young.
That song goes up to a high C, and you cannot busk your way around that. You can either sing a high C or you can't, and he sung it.
And he gets it. Not easy. And yeah, we were really proud of him. It's so difficult to be happy with something where you have so much expectations. And this kind of expectations, they were changing during the production. In the beginning, we just wanted to release the single, do a record, and in the end, it was like, this has to be the most perfect song in the world. You know?
I mean, if I go through all these hundreds and hundreds of different cover versions of the song, the Alphaville version, the one that Cohen produced, you know, is the most perfect. I mean, and it's the most timeless. For one reason, it's not an 80s song or whatever. You know, it's a complete timeless song. It's like a time capsule that travels to time, and we weren't able to recognize that. You know, when the song was finished, it was because of the circumstances. It's really a fantastic album, and if I was a religious person, I would say we wrote it with the help of God. Or, more dangerous, God told us to write it.
I completely agree. I mean, there's for sure nothing to regret now.
Everything we did was right. I mean, we were, nobody could stop us. I can't find any fault, you know, and we were guided by the light, and we followed it, and we had a song at that time called Traumtänzer. And there's one lyric in it, which is folgt der Automatik, geh ins Zentrum des Bildschirms. Jeder geht für sich, jeder geht allein auf seinem Weg nach Alphaville. That was exactly that what we were. We were Traumtänzers. You know, we followed our dreams, and because we followed it so strictly, we couldn't go wrong.